The state of New York has filed a civil rights lawsuit against Harvey Weinstein and the Weinstein Company. This happened as the Weinstein Company was expecting a sale to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. But what's interesting about this civil rights suit is that we now have even more gruesome details regarding the allegations against Harvey Weinstein and notably his staff, who, according to this suit, enabled him and allowed this predatory behavior to continue. Now, the suit was filed by New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman in New York County Supreme Court late Sunday, and it alleges violations of the state's human rights, civil rights, and business laws. I'm gonna go through some of the allegations that are noted in this suit. They're, of course, not all of the allegations, but in my opinion, some of the more notable ones, some of which we haven't heard of before. Now, according to the suit, Weinstein regularly berated women using gender-based obscenities, calling female employees all sorts of expletives that you can see on the screen there, instead of using their first names when he was angry. He also allegedly threatened the lives of his employees, saying, quote, "I will kill your family," and quote, "You don't know what I can do." He apparently also bragged about his political connections and how he had friends in the Secret Service and that how they can basically take care of him on any issue.
I want to pause there, Anna, for two reasons. One is on the first quote about calling people an expletive is one thing, and within the context of the work environment, bad enough. But to use it as their name, to use the C word as the name of the women who work for them, that sent a chill down my spine. I mean, it's just new layers of the monstrous behavior every day.
Yeah, and it gets worse. It gets
it's gonna get way worse in a second. But on the allegations of him saying, "I'll have you killed or your family killed," now you say that's preposterous. That's over the top. It's not a movie producer's not gonna have you killed. But remember this context: Weinstein would get things done that didn't seem possible. He would have movies win Oscars that had no business winning Oscars. He would manipulate and change the dynamics of Hollywood over and over, and people saw it. If he said you were gonna get a role, you'd get a role. If he said you weren't gonna get a role, your career was over. So in that context, that those threats become a little bit more credible.
Right, and remember, Ronan Farrow had also published this incredible piece about how Weinstein would do Oppo research on the women that he had already victimized in a way to intimidate them so they wouldn't come forward with the accusations. And also, if they did come forward, it was a way of slandering them to the point where no one would take them seriously. So, if someone like that said to me, "I'm going to kill you and your family," yeah, I would be terrified, and a lot of his employees were. Now, the suit also alleges that the management and board at the company were repeatedly presented with credible evidence of Weinstein's sexual harassment and his use of corporate employees and resources to facilitate sexual activity. Now, the reason why that's mentioned in the suit is because part of his company is also dealing with this because they feel that the suit alleges that they did not do enough to protect these employees, that they essentially enabled this type of predatory behavior. Also, Weinstein berated a female employee in 2012, threatening to, quote, "cut her loins." I mean, these threats are terrifying. Let's go to the next one. The company employed one group of female employees whose primary job it was to go with Weinstein to events and facilitate his sexual conquests. They were called Weinstein's wing women. By the way, so there were apparently 3 groups of female employees that he had, all 3 of which were given the job of facilitating predatory behavior, according to this suit, by the way. The second group of women were compelled to take various steps to further Weinstein's regular sexual activity, including by contacting friends of Harvey and other prospective sexual partners. Now, members of this group at various times allegedly had to handle Weinstein's erectile dysfunction shots and even administer the injections. Others had to prepare rooms in his office for sexual activity and clean up after it was over.
Oh, I don't know which part of that is worse.
All of it, all of it. The third predominantly female group had to facilitate Weinstein's sexual activity by meeting with prospective sexual conquests and then following through on the employment opportunities promised by Weinstein after. Because remember, one way that he would lure women into his hotel rooms or on dates with him was by promising to further their careers.
And by the way, also to crush their careers if they didn't abide by it. So first of all, on the cut her loins comment, remember this is a guy who's accused of physical assault and rape. Sometimes he'd just barge into a room, even when the woman was trying to close the door, and then rape the woman involved. And there's over 50 allegations of different kinds of sexual harassment and assault all the way up to rape. And so if he threatened to do physical violence against you, sometimes that threat was carried out. And then in terms of the women who worked for him, one, you should not make blanket assumptions about anyone that worked at those companies because you don't know if they were involved in this or not. And number two, keep in mind that he also threatened everyone else who worked there. So you don't know how he threatened these women to get to be the quote unquote wing women. And it wasn't just women. Drivers were always told to keep condoms whenever Harvey came into Los Angeles or New York. And also keep the erectile dysfunction shots available in the car if he needed them. And so, unsurprising that he is acted out in these ways due to some insecurities likely. And I mean, anyway, so I just when you think Harvey Weinstein can't get any worse, the idea that he would assign women the job of giving them the erectile dysfunction shot, before he went to harass or assault women, then he would have other women decide to either further or kill the careers of the women who wouldn't sleep with him. And then finally, the cleanup role. Oh, Jesus, it's heartbreaking, man.
Yeah, he saw all of these people as disposable, as, his playthings, women were there for his pleasure and his pleasure only. I mean, he is as disgusting as can be. And his lawyer did release a statement in regard to this lawsuit saying that while some of his behavior was uncalled for, he denies the accusations that have been listed in this suit.
And by the way, this is not a random person trying to get rich. This is the New York Attorney General. He's a very serious guy. And he's following up on what is some of the worst human rights abuses that I've ever heard of at a company, as well he should, that's his job. I don't know what the statute of limitations on some of these crimes, alleged crimes are, but I hope to God somebody's looking into that, because if he hasn't run out of the statute of limitations, there's plenty of apparent criminal activity here to pursue as well. What you just watched was one of the videos that we do today, but we actually do a whole 2-hour show every single day. It's a podcast. You can watch it in video or listen to it as audio. You can download it, you can stream it, and you get it completely ad-free if you could become a member of the Young Turks. tytnetwork.com/join.